This actually is a big story, and it matters directly to you for one particular reason, and that is the current president of the United States puffed up his chest 2 years ago, very big and bad, after Alexei Navalny, the 47-year-old activist critic of Vladimir Putin, was placed in prison. He was then moved to a gulag where he has been murdered, and he has been murdered. They say he dropped dead in the yard of the gulag. Yesterday, he was perfectly fine at a court appearance, continuing his fight. He wasn't going to give up. Today, he's dead. He was murdered. There are no windows to shove someone out of in the gulag for him to accidentally fall out. This is the problem with this. This is where President Biden was in 2021.
Mr. President, just a quick follow on the same theme of consequences. You said just now that you spoke to him a lot about human rights. What did you say would happen if opposition leader Alexei Navalny dies?
I made it clear to him that I believe the consequences of that would be devastating for Russia. I'll go back to the same point. What do you think happens when he's saying it's not about hurting Navalny, all the stuff he says to rationalize the treatment of Navalny, and then he dies in prison? I pointed out to him that it matters a great deal when a country, in fact, and they asked me why I thought it was important to continue to have problems with the president of Syria. I said because there's a violation of international norm. It's called a chemical weapons treaty. It can't be trusted. It's about trust. It's about their ability to influence other nations in a positive way.
Now, you will note that Joe Biden did not say that we would do anything. He just said the consequences would be devastating to Russia. Now, what does this all matter? It matters because Alexei Navalny was a Democrat in the broad sense of the word, not a partisan Democrat, but he supported democracy and supported reforms in Russia to liberalize it and bring it towards the West. Vladimir Putin has killed every significant opponent of his over the last number of years. The prior opponent to Vladimir Putin in 2015 had a random stray bullet fall out of the sky as he walked past the Kremlin one night. Yeah, literally, a just random bullet happened to fall out of the sky and kill him. It wasn't an assassination. It was a random stray bullet like you might find in Chicago. But of course, as you know, Tucker Carlson tells us, this sort of thing doesn't happen in Moscow. So just a random stray bullet fell out of the sky. And then that gave rise to Alexei Navalny, who was a activist for democracy and economic liberalization in Russia. He has been house arrested, abused, placed in prison, and now killed in the gulag. Here's Richard Haas, who was on Morning Joe, to give you a sense of this.
Yeah, make no mistake about it, Alexei Navalny was killed, whatever the immediate precipitating event. He had emerged over the last 2 decades as the principal opposition critic of Vladimir Putin. And his principal theme was really one of Putin had amassed enormous power and was using it, among other things, for personal gain. And that's why I think, Willie, he was such a threat to Putin, that this powerful despot in Russia was so worried about this guy, because corruption is something that the average person can appreciate and understand. You don't have to be a reader of Foreign Affairs magazine to have a feeling for corruption. So Putin took him seriously, which explains the attempts on Navalny's life, the harsh imprisonment. And I think that's what we learned from that.
Now, I'm just going to stop there, and I'm going to say something broadly here. I want each of you to utter out loud, wherever you are, if you'll dare take me up on it, I want you to speak, give voice to your criticisms of Joe Biden. I think Joe Biden is an 80-something senile old man with growing dementia who's being abused by his wife to keep him in power when he doesn't have any clue where he is. He drools at night. He's in the pocket of the progressives, destroying this country, and he and his family made their family fortune on deep, deep ties to corruption through Hunter Biden, a crackhead, to keep himself in power. Go on, do it. Say whatever you want to say about Joe Biden. Say it out loud. And you're still alive. and you're not going to go to jail. There are a number of people, particularly on social media on the right, who have rushed in to say this is just what they did to Navalny is exactly like what they're doing to Donald Trump. Really, Donald Trump has a private plane he gets to fly around on whenever he wants. He lives in a mansion. He gets to fundraise and run for president of the United States. You know who doesn't get to do any of that? Alexei Navalny. He got killed and was imprisoned without due process. Donald Trump has lawyers who go to court for him. He shows up by choice. They fight for him. They give him due process rights. He has won a number of appeals. He's going to win a Supreme Court case on keeping him on the ballot. If you're comparing Donald Trump to Alexei Navalny, you're a morally stupid person who is morally bankrupt, because the United States has massive, massive flaws, particularly under the present leadership, but it is no way comparable to Russia. And if you're using what they did to Alexei Navalny, and then you're using what they're doing to Donald Trump, or pick your supposed patriot who's being persecuted, Roger Stone, Steve Bannon, whoever, you're doing exactly what the Soviet-era sympathizers did to the United States in the 50s and 60s. You have become the partisan left. You are in horseshoe theory. The far right and the far left are the same things. Literally nothing that you can point to in this country is as bad as Russia, including the politics. For perspective, for real perspective, people. My home we had 3 people show up on our front porch to threaten me. My children were beaten up at school. They were chased through a store by a man harassing them and me. My daughter was given a guide to commit suicide and encouraged to commit suicide at school. They told her, the kids who gave it to her and pushed her to do it, told her that if she did, perhaps her father would see the light, because I didn't back Donald Trump. You want to make it about the left? I've experienced it with people on my own side who wanted me to get in line. And none of you experienced anything like that. None of you had your children being given guides to suicide and pushed to commit suicide and bullied online and encouraged to commit suicide and told how to commit suicide. Your children were not beaten up at school. You didn't have people show up at your home to threaten you. And for some reason, some of you are out there saying, oh, it's just as bad as Russia. We're just as bad as Russia. And I'm the guy who went through all of that, and I can tell you, you are full of crap. You don't know what you're talking about. Your brain has been so rotted by your politics that you can't even see reason anymore. Yes, in this country, we have hypocrites. Yes, in this country, we don't treat corruption like we should. Yes, in this country, there are double standards. Yes, in this country, partisans get away with things depending on who's in charge and who's in power. Yes, all of those things are true. And still, it's not like Russia. And still, Donald Trump is no political martyr like Alexei Navalny. If you can't see that, I'm sorry that you're so profoundly broken, but you're broken because you've moved into a world where politics has become your religion. And when you show up at church on Sunday, I bet you're upset that your pastor doesn't talk about politics from the pulpit, unless you've left and gone to one where every Sunday's just a political sermon. I have experienced what you all say is an awful thing, but I experienced it from people on the right. Even though I'm a conservative. That's why I actually had it happen to me, because people on my side felt betrayed by me because I wasn't telling them what they wanted to hear. I wasn't on their side, they thought. You can say a lot of bad things about Joe Biden, and I have on this radio program. I've called him Grandpa Dementia, among other things. And I've lived to tell about it. I'm not worried about a car bomb going off in my car when I go start it this afternoon, because I'm an American and I live in the United States, a flawed country far more perfect than Russia. Alexei Navalny dying should remind you that there are vast differences between the United States and Russia. And I don't care what you think about the people in jail because of January 6th. I don't care what you think about Roger Stone or Donald Trump being prosecuted. Hey, you know what? Donald Trump is a favorable Trump-appointed judge in Florida. Did Alexei Navalny ever have a favorable judge? No, of course not. No, because all of the judges were picked by Vladimir Putin. The deck was stacked against him, and he wasn't given due process rights. Unlike Donald Trump, who is seeing a case in the state of Georgia be blown up because the district attorney had an affair with the special prosecutor, and they undermined their own position. Would that happen in Russia? No, it wouldn't. The Supreme Court of the United States, including the progressives on the court, had a hearing on whether Donald Trump should be on the ballot in Colorado or not. We don't know what they'll decide, but we're pretty sure they'll decide against Colorado. Would that happen in Russia? Of course not. Maybe check your criticisms about the United States and go touch a little bit of grass, because this online mob of America haters on the right is deeply, deeply unseemly. And I'll tell you where this heads to a dangerous point where the people who are anti-woke, who are fighting the wokes, decide they hate this country so much that they come across as anti-American and they undermine the entire crusade to battle the left on wokeness. You have a bunch of people. There's this End Wokeness account on social media that I follow that is out trashing the United States, saying it's just like Russia. We have no moral authority to criticize the Russians. Oh, yes, we do, because despite our flaws are exposed and you are allowed to talk about those flaws, unlike in Russia. Stop behaving like the progressives and dragging this country. I don't like Joe Biden and the Democrats in charge either, but you know what? We can go have an election in November and try to change that, except some of you have even gone so far as to convince yourselves it's impossible to change the future of the country. And yet, Brian Kemp got reelected in Georgia despite all the left against him and even the Trump supporters against him. Weird how that worked, isn't it? Only apparently works against one person, and y'all decided to renominate him. This insanity on the right has got to stop. These are serious, dangerous times. And the America hating from the right because you're not in power is no better than the America hating from the left because they're not in power. It is a weird thing that both the far right and the far left of this country have decided they hate this country so much they want to end the American world order, and they'll collaborate together to do it, whether it's Tucker Carlson or God knows who on the left. This country remains the greatest country on earth. And Alexei Navalny is dead today because he was a man who championed the rights that you and I have in a country that denied them to him and ultimately murdered him. And if you don't believe me, I challenge you, go stand on a street corner with a megaphone and yell the most awful things you can about Joe Biden. And I guarantee you tomorrow you will wake up unarrested and just fine, because despite your hysteria, we are the land of the free and the home of the brave still.